Let's start with yesterday's developments. Scott Bessent came out talking about this so-called D-Day, though no new sanctions were actually introduced. We also saw an envoy heading to Iran to hold talks with Iranian officials. So walk us through what happened yesterday and where things stand right now.
Well, I looked up in the sky all day and I was waiting for paratroopers to land and ships to take over, come and land troops, bring in troops to take the coast and move towards the capital. And then we'd all be waving the American flag, but didn't happen. So we're back to normal. What really happened, Nima, is that the United States humiliated itself. I mean, there's no doubt that the United States will try to put pressure on neighboring countries, and they are doing that. Countries, well, I don't want to name them, but they want to put pressure on Iran, and they're putting pressure on neighboring countries and friendly countries. But whatever it is that they're trying to do, obviously, it is not at all in line with the claims that they made. Going to happen, and how Iran is going to collapse and fall apart is that obviously didn't what he said yesterday was not in line with the claims that they made for the last couple of weeks, and that itself weakens the United States, because that aura of power, that sense of power that the United States has created for itself, when it falls apart, it weakens the country. So when the United States attacked Iran, people across the world expected Iran to collapse, but Iran was steadfast. Not only did it survive, it won the war. So now the US military is seen as weak and ineffective. So the United States, even though Iran has been under maximum pressure sanctions for decades, now that Trump came forward and said, we're going to demolish them, and Bessent said, we're going to crush them, and then he comes out and said, and it was clear that there wasn't much he could do, but still the expectation among people across the world was that maybe he could pull a rabbit out of a hat. Maybe there's some secret ingredients that he could put together and bring an end to Iran. But when they saw that it was basically a continuation of what the sanctions that already exist, and of course, as I said, they're going to put added pressure and try to create more difficulty for Iran. But still, it's not going to be a game changer by any means. And so the result is that people across the world are going to say, wow, the Iranians withstood their military. The Iranians withstood everything that the Americans could throw at them, militarily speaking. And now they've been able to withstand everything that the Americans can throw at them economically. That diminishes the United States. So while I think that in the weeks ahead, there will be some challenges for Iran, but not the sort of challenges that Trump and Bessent and others were trying to pretend were going to be created. So I think it was a foolish move. Just like the war was foolish, this is foolish. And the Iranians are going to intensify their pressure. We discussed this before. General Rezai, his appointment as the chair of the Supreme National Security Council sends a strong message that Iran is going to be tougher with the United States. It hits, Iran will hit back harder. Iran has been doing this over the past 6 months. We saw it on the battlefield. But I think what we're going to be seeing from now on is going to be even more tough. Iran is going to show even a greater assertiveness in its posture towards the United States and towards U.S. allies. So if the United States harms Iran, Iran is going to harm the United States, and the Iranians are going to harm U.S. allies. And because all of these countries in the region that cooperated with the United States, they're complicit in this war. They are they have been acting as Iran's enemies. And if they continue to participate, especially in this economic warfare, they will be treated as Iran's enemies. So the Emirates should be very careful. The Qatari regime should be very careful, and so on. But in any case, the trip by the Pakistani delegation was positive, from my understanding. And the Iranians were very clear that with regards to the United States, the United States has to fulfill its obligations. Iran is not seeking to overplay its hand. Iran is not going to overplay its hand. But Iran has a very strong hand, to use Western terminology. I don't play poker or anything like that, but we saw Dr. Bagway just the other day say that we are now good. We were good chess players, and now we're good at poker too, and we combine them. I don't know much about poker. I don't know anything about poker, but Iran has a very strong hand. Iran won't overplay it, but it has a lot to do. It has a lot of things that it can do. What Iran wants is the full implementation of the MOU as Iran interprets it. As Iran interprets it. In other words, we discussed this before. In Article 1, Lebanon and the other fronts, now the Iranians are very clear about what that means, those other fronts. I've been saying it on your show from day one when the MOU was signed that Iran means Gaza, it means Palestine. But Iran went even further than that. It says Iraq and Yemen alongside Palestine and Gaza in particular. And other things in the MOU, your audience knows them very well. I don't want to bore them with this. But the point is that Iran is going to be insistent. Now, it would, of course, be humiliating for Trump to implement the MOU because he never intended to do so. He signed it, but he never intended to implement it. He violated it from the beginning. But ultimately, for Iran, that has to happen. And whether he does it officially or does it unofficially and effectively implements the MOU and pretends he's doing something else, Iran doesn't care. The Iran stolen assets have to be returned. Iran will demand that the Americans end the wars across the region. The war has to come to an end, and so on. All of these things have to happen. All the things in the MOU have to happen for normalization to take place. And Iran is not going to accept promises. So the ball is in Trump's court. And the Iranians know that the midterm elections are 2.5 months away. And that every day that goes circumstances where the bond market is volatile, where the Japanese currency is under pressure, where the trends in US public opinion are turning away from Trump. Every day that goes by and this war continues, it's bad news for Trump. Iran knows this. So Iran would obviously use that to its advantage. And Trump can't do anything about it. There's nothing he can do. So the only way forward for Trump is to implement the deal. He doesn't have to do it in name, but he can do it, and he can pretend that he won the war, or he can say that, the Iranians promised him the world, and that's why he's going to end the siege, and that's why he's going to hand over Iranian assets, because stealing assets is not good for the US dollar, or whatever. He got what he wanted from you. He can say whatever he wants and pretend that he's the great leader of the United States. But Iran will have to see US forces pull out. Iran will have to see the Israeli regime pull out of Gaza and end the genocide, and pull out of Lebanon and end the destruction. Every day they're killing people in Lebanon, teenagers, young people on motorcycles. They're just a bunch of criminals. These Zionists. And Gaza is just horrific. Just yesterday, a sniper shot a 10-year-old girl in the head or in the back as she was eating and in her tent. I mean, these animals have to be reined in, and so these vicious animals. And so that's the Iranian expectation. Now, people in the West may say, well, these are big demands. Well, they are, but they're demands and the genocide. If that's something that people in the West or elites in the West find difficult to swallow, who cares? It has to happen. The genocide has to stop. So Iranian demands are clear, and Iran doesn't care if Netanyahu, uh, will refuse to do it. That's not our problem. You want the Strait of Hormuz open? You want to go back to normal life? Stop killing kids. It's pretty easy. Again, as I said, for Western elites, that's unacceptable. The Israelis should be allowed to kill kids. Why shouldn't they? These Western diplomats, these Western journalists, they're used to the Israelis sniping kids and bombing kids. We can't get used to it. Sorry. We can't get used to it. It has to stop. So if you want your economies to go back to normal, you have to stop killing kids. It's pretty easy. So we are where we are, Nima. We are where we are. Iran has a strong hand, and yes, the economy is hurting, and yes, it's going to be difficult, but Iran is very confident that it will be able to withstand whatever pressure the Americans put on it, and Iran has the ability to increase the pressure on the United States and its allies. And US allies in the Persian Gulf are weaker and more vulnerable than many people in the West seem to acknowledge. If this situation continues for much longer, it's unclear what's going to happen to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain and the Emirates. These are not powerful countries. They're police states, all of them. They're dictatorships, all of them. But that old lifestyle that existed is gone. That global status that they had managed to create for themselves is gone. The wealth that they used to have is no longer there. And in order to just sustain themselves, they're going to have to sell bonds and they're going to have to withdraw money from the United States. I don't think the Americans will allow them to do that because that would destabilize the bond market. That would destabilize the US economy. Japan is trouble enough. And the other crises are trouble enough. The fact that these regimes are no longer contributing to the bond market and the stock market in the United States because of the war that they participated in is trouble enough. So if they can't withdraw their cash, then they're going to be in serious trouble. If they do withdraw their cash, the United States is going to be in trouble. So in any case, Iran has a lot of leverage. And again, Iran has no intention of overplaying its hand. Iran does not want forever wars. Iran wants the region to move back to stability, to quiet. Iran wants trade to be normalized in the Persian Gulf. It wants the Strait of Hormuz to be a center for business and trade. But Trump signed the MOU, and it has to be fully implemented. Whether in the name of the MOU or by some other, or in some different way, that's what has happened.
So there was an official response as well. They said these sanctions are unilateral, and Qatar came out in support of mediation efforts to resolve the issue. I think it's significant that Qatar chose to speak up this way. Do you think, out of all the GCC countries you mentioned, one of them is fully cooperating with the United States? Is it the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar? Even though Qatar has publicly leaned toward mediation rather than economic warfare, since honestly no one benefits from an economic war on Iran. How do you see this playing out?
Qatar was one of the countries that helped the United States create that corridor that led to the revival of the war. Qatar helped undermine the MOU, like the others. Well, Qatar played its part in reviving the war. And as you and I speak, there are US planes in Qatar, including refueling planes. Why are they there? So that if the United States wants to restart the bombing or the Israeli regime, those Israeli jets and American jets would be refueled by these planes. So Qatar is prepared to help kill more Iranians. And those planes will be using Qatari jet fuel. And the bases are paid for by Qatar. The same is true elsewhere. Since you named Qatar, I'm just saying this. All of them are part of this war effort. So if they really want to see the view in Tehran change, they know what they have to do, but they can't pretend that we are ignorant. So Al Jazeera and Al Arabi and all these other media outlets and all these people that are funded by Qatar, and Qatar funds a lot of people in Turkey, in Europe, in the West, in the Arab world. They own media, they fund media, they own centers, they fund centers, religious centers, Wahhabi centers, Salafi centers. Qatar, it can propagate whatever narrative it wants. Iran doesn't care. The facts on the ground have to change. Just as I said with Trump, Trump can pretend that he is not implementing the MOU, or he can pretend that Iran gave these secret concessions and that's why he's going to implement the MOU. It doesn't matter to us. He can say what he wants. What is important is that he carries out his obligations. What is important is that Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Jordan, that they refrain from assisting the Israeli regime in the United States. From our perspective, they are all, not from our perspective, objectively speaking, they are all in the Netanyahu-Trump camp. They may not like being there. They may be in that camp because they are under duress. Doesn't matter to us. It's like someone, being a member of a gang and they kill people, and then one of them says, I was forced to do it. Doesn't matter. You were there, you're part of the aggression, you helped kill people, you're an enemy. So if they want to bring about real change, they know that it has to be reflected in their actions, not some foreign ministry statement. That's not enough.
Do you think Iran and Pakistan are moving toward some kind of security agreement, given the situation along the border and in Balochistan? And it's not just about the border itself. It's really about how the war has reshaped the relationship between the two countries. If that's the case, could this lead to a new level of understanding between Iran and Pakistan?
Well, the people of Iran and Pakistan have a long historical relationship. And so in general, people in Iran like Pakistani people, like people in Pakistan. And vice versa. The Pakistani people have a very close relationship with Iran. But the Pakistani government has always had a very close relationship with Saudi Arabia for obvious reasons. And that has impeded and of course, the United States. Pakistan has always been close to the United States, the government is close to the United States, and that has prevented certain projects, for example, the gas project between Iran and Pakistan, which could have had huge consequences for the Pakistani economy. The Americans blocked it. That's just one example. But today, because of the situation, Pakistan needs Iran. So that creates an environment for greater cooperation across the border, your energy exports, imports through Pakistan. There's a greater incentive today for cooperation between the two sides. And that, I think, is important, and it will be important in the days and weeks and months, and hopefully in the years ahead. But the Americans and the Saudis don't like that. But I think as time goes by, if the United States and the Saudis continue with these policies, their leverage will decrease. If the Saudi Arabia may not last. And I've been saying this for a long time now. If the Americans had struck our critical infrastructure back then during the war, Iran would have destroyed their critical infrastructure. And that would have ended Saudi Arabia and these other countries. And today, the threats that the United States are making is going to reflect. It's going to be reflected in Iranian policy. More pressure on Iran, more pressure on whoever cooperates with the United States. So if this continues for much longer, as I said, these regimes are brittle. They won't last. But in any case, as things stand, the leverage of Saudi Arabia and the United States will continue to diminish.
We've heard something, it might just be a rumor, that Iraq is pushing for a new security understanding between Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. Is there any truth to that? Has there been talk of some kind of new arrangement between Saudi Arabia and Iraq, especially given how serious tensions have gotten between them? Remember, part of the Iraqi army, the PMF, was struck by Saudi Arabia and the United States. They claimed it wasn't them, that it was the U.S. hitting the targets, but that doesn't change what actually happened on the ground. So how do you see Iraq's role in all this? And given that Trump is pressuring them to cut every single tie with Iran, where does that leave things?
Well, remember, General Soleimani was murdered when he went to Iraq, and he was on his way to see the Prime Minister, Dr. Adel Abdul Mahdi, who had received a message from Saudi Arabia. And the Americans, and of course Netanyahu, and Trump, the idiot, Netanyahu's useful idiot, he murdered General Soleimani, and Mr. Adel Abdul Mahdi, the head of the Iraqi resistance against ISIS, and their companions, he murdered them at the behest of the Israeli regime, because Netanyahu wanted. Again, it just shows how foolish Trump is. But he was there to ease tensions with Saudi Arabia. So Iran wants better relations with Saudi Arabia, and Iraq can play that part. However, there are U.S. planes on Saudi territory, and the United States is increasing pressure on Iran, and the Saudis are assisting the United States. So that has to be resolved. If it isn't, Saudi Arabia, its exports will go to zero. Its oil exports will go to zero. So if the United States succeeds in trying to, if it whatever let's not say succeed, it won't succeed. But if it is able to put more pressure on Iran, Iran will put more pressure on U.S. assets in the region. That includes Saudi Arabia. That includes all Saudi oil exports. Iran will go to zero. So there's no way of escaping this reality. Whether they invite Iran to join a coalition, or there's a triangle, the Saudi, Turkish, Pakistani agreement, or whether it is some Saudi, Iraq, Iran agreement, that is not going to stop Iran from putting pressure on Saudi Arabia if it continues to cooperate with the United States against Iran. So Saudi Arabia has to find a solution to its problems. Going to Turkey and to Pakistan and then to Iraq, that's not going to solve the problem. It has to stop being an agent or a proxy of the United States. At least when it comes to Iran, it can give the United States all sort, its oil wealth. It can do whatever it wants to maintain its power, the ruling family. That's not Iran's concern. It can do whatever business it wants. It can it can give Aramco to the United States as a gift. That's not our business. It has to stop being a threat and helping the United States threaten Iran. That has to end. And of course, Yemen and Iraq, wherever.
Who's going to be able to resolve the issue between Yemen and Saudi Arabia other than Iran?
Saudi Arabia. Iran, from the very beginning, during the genocidal war that the Saudis and the Emiratis carried out with the support of all these countries and the West, it was a war of genocide like Gaza. But no one, Al Jazeera didn't bother to support them. So very few people heard of it. I mean, people heard about it from press TV, and that was sanctioned, or some, media outlets that were sympathetic to the people of Yemen. But people across the world didn't hear about it. There was silence. So the world was silent as the genocide was happening, starvation, slaughter, murder. During that war, Saudi Arabia came when they saw that they were failing. They turned to Iran and asked Iran to solve the problem. Iran said, you have to solve it directly. You have to go and speak to Yemen. You have to speak with Sana'a. You have to solve your problems with the government in Sana'a. The Saudis didn't want to do that because that would be implying that they accepted Yemen's sovereignty and that the government in Sana'a was legitimate. And they didn't want to do that. And Iran said, well, we're not going to solve it for you. We can help facilitate dialogue, but we're not going to solve your problem. Solving the problem lies in the two capitals, Riyadh and Sana'a. And that's what it is today as well. And now we're seeing that Sana'a is much more powerful than the Americans and the Saudis expected. They have the ability to hurt Saudi Arabia very badly. So Saudi Arabia can solve it tonight. They can solve it tomorrow. Just like Trump can solve his problems with Iran tonight or tomorrow. Is he going to do it? No. Will Saudi Arabia do it? We don't see evidence of it. But at the end of the day, the only way to solve the problem with Yemen is by talking to the government in Yemen and ending the siege. This is a barbaric siege that they've imposed on Yemen. And the West won't tell you about it. Al Jazeera won't tell you about it. Al Arabiya won't tell you about it. But this siege has been ongoing and it's directed at ordinary people in Yemen, just like the US siege on Iran. But US cannot undermine Iran, and the Saudis cannot undermine Yemen. And what is happening is that both Saudi Arabia and the United States are being weakened as a result. Do they want to prevent catastrophe for themselves? That's the solution is clear. The United States has to implement its obligations within the framework of the MOU, whether in the name of the MOU or not doesn't matter to us. And the Saudis have to end the siege on Yemen. It's not really very complicated. But of course, the arrogance of the United States and the arrogance of the Saudis makes it difficult, if not almost impossible.